Barrie Cadogan, best known for composing and playing world's most recognizable TV intro theme. Better Call Saul. He's a rhythm guitar master, combining elements from funk, soul and blues, creating a sound that's entirely his own. Barrie toured with Liam Gallagher and played with renowned acts like The and his own band. It's proving me that few play with his touch, tone and taste. I wondered so often why the end of that theme just like...
Well, that's what they wanted. So, yeah, we had to keep it at 20 seconds because that was the brief. So we were trying to time each composition to be able to cut dead on there. So you literally get the very front of the one of the next bar and then it's off. Kind of thing. So it's literally like it's gone. When you're doing it, we got a very rough idea of the visuals of what they wanted for the start of the episode. So I had to sort of go away and write over a weekend and give them 17 different ideas. They liked this song that I'd written called Why Don't You Do It, that was on our second album. That had a similar guitar sound.
Yeah.
They had a look that went, I haven't played this for years, I might get it, so... And that's how the song starts. So they like that kind of guitar sound.
Yeah.
And they said, could you do something in that vein, you know?
Very recognizable.
Was the idea. And so that's what we did. And I gave them 17 different ideas. We mixed them, sent them off. And a week later they came back and said, oh, they're great, can you do 12 more? So we did the same again. And you also know that other writers are pitching for this as well. So it's not just
attention.
So we didn't think we'd get it, but we did, you know, which was
And you wrote like 25 plus themes? And they
29 in total.
29.
Yeah.
And they just paid for one, or?
Yeah, well, at least they chose us, but they chose number 7. Which was that one. Yeah,
number 7.
Number 7.
Lucky number 7.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I'm here with Barrie Cadogan.
Yeah,
am I pronouncing it right?
You did it right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm amazed with your guitar playing, your style, your sense of time, your rhythm guitar playing, especially is really captivating.
Rhythm's been a big part of things for me. I mean, I've always been into. There's a lot of music I love. It's very rhythm driven, and I've always been very inspired by drummers as well as guitar players, really, and rhythms in general. So I don't understand why rhythm guitar is thought of as kind of a lesser role in some way or something. Or there's not always a strict distinction between what's a rhythm part or a lead part for me. I mean, sometimes the key part is more rhythm based, sometimes it's more single note. I guess I got inspiration from that initially. It's very obvious, but it's someone like Jimi Hendrix, where he would be combining rhythmical playing and lead. And I can't play like him, but it was just a thing of accompanying yourself with a bit of time or a bit of a chord and some single notes. And so I guess I started trying to do that in my own way, but... Yeah, that kind of thing, you know. Really just try and create a bit of a mood with it and keep time somehow.
It's really, I noticed your picking hand is doing something spectacular actually. You're strumming the chords with the fingers and at the same time you keep your pick going.
Yeah, I don't really know how I started doing that, but the thing I like about that is that you've got a slightly different tone with your fingers and a different dynamic level. So the pick is kind of harder and more definite and the fingers are softer. So
show me one example.
You can get something more plucky, more definite on the low strings. I guess a bit like using a thumb pick. But then you see, it's almost like trying to treat what I'm doing with the pick like the kick drum or something, and the fingers being the backbeat like the snare, I suppose.
Okay, yeah.
And and also trying to get a different dynamic with the fingers, so it's not as exactly as loud or whatever. So it could be softer. Try and get more colour in it, or more light and shade somehow. You know, something like that. Just try and get. It's just a different sound, really. And sometimes I found it more interesting. You can do it all with a pick. It's more definite, which is still cool, but it's stronger, it's more aggressive.
Yeah.
Or you can do it, you know, take the pick out.
This looks so good. I love this. I want to explain. I want to learn this. You played that low.
Yeah. So
you played it with your thumb.
Yeah.
And then you do.
Yeah. So it's just basically those two notes. It's probably like an old blues R&B lick, really.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think.
And then with the fingers. Let me try it one time.
Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah. But I was doing sometimes you can do it with a pick.
Oh.
And you can start to throw things in the gaps, you see. Put anything in there, really. So that's, I mean, it took me a while to develop this style of playing,
really
but
nice.
A good way to learn things, for me anyway, when I'm trying to learn something, if I'm doing a session or something, is I slow things right down sometimes, you know, so that might be an easy way. Just to get used to what your fingers need to do in the gap. Because you realise that once you get to here, you need to answer that with the pick again to keep the time, so...
I think it's very interesting. You do something I love to do as well, like hybrid picking, like when you do this.
Yeah.
You played the D string with your pick and the B string with your middle finger.
Yeah, it's like, I think that's like an old T-Bone Walker sort of thing, because he used to do it with those chords, didn't he? With that kind of chord, but it took me a while to develop this thing. I sort of didn't realise I was doing it. In a way, it's something that developed over time.
Yeah, that's always the best way to develop things.
I do play more with my fingers now than I used to. I think it's just happened over time, and try and dip into different styles because you never know what you're going to draw from it. I don't feel like I'm ever going to master any of those styles, but maybe a little bit of it will go into my own style.
Absolutely.
Or something like that. You know.
What was the one lick where you...
I mean, I was just making it up, but yeah, it's sometimes like a bit of blues, I guess. And it's going from the flat and fifth rather than the fourth, you know. Just gives... I like a bit of dissonance sometimes in things. It's only subtle, but...
It's a bit...
Yeah, it just gives it a different attitude. I mean, to me it feels different to go in... Because you've got that... Which is more regular. I don't know, it makes it feel different.
It's really nice.
It's simple.
It's just a little note that makes all the difference, actually. And then you also...
Yeah, sometimes... Because you can bend that into the major third if you want. Which is good, you know. You can do it. Or sometimes you can just hammer it on. It's more like an R&B lick or a gospel blues thing. I mean, with the tremolo sound, it sounds quite gospel, you know, but...
that's so good. It's sometimes even... It adds more character if you're not fully reaching that major. Like it's.
Yeah.
I spoke to Julian Lodge. Do you know him? Julian Lodge, great jazz player, and I asked him about his bending because sometimes it feels not very well intonated, but he's probably the best player on earth. And he said, "Yeah, I do that deliberately, basically, because
definitely
it just adds like where he does like this."
Well, that's where the fun is for me, and that's where the spirit is of things that I like. Like one of my favourite records of all time is "Gimme Shelter" Rolling Stones, and Keith's deliberately doing that in that, you know. he's deliberately bending it flat or bending it so it has a different emotional pull, and that's what's important rather than. It's not whether it's correct or not, it's about how it feels, and that's the.
Yeah.
Because it's a total feel difference between like going back to this, being in tune and. You can make it sound. It's just language, isn't it? That's where the blue feel is, you know, in between the notes. Rather than. It says something different, doesn't it? You know.
Yeah.
You know, so much guitar music I love, but there's a lot of guitar music out there already. So I was trying to look for chord voicings that were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's loads of great songs written with your classic cowboy chords or whatever, you know, which is brilliant. But I was just trying to find voices that for me were, a little bit different. And when I started trying to study what Jimi Hendrix was doing, obviously you can never reach it, but I found his chord shapes interesting. Also, I could never play like this. It was always really uncomfortable. So when I saw him playing chords this way, and other people like Steve Cropper doing it, or I think like Pete Townsend as well, people sometimes using this kind of chord shape, it made more sense to me because I could between single notes more, rather than having to change position. I mean, I just could never do that.
Also, isn't this the worst chord? Like
an A bar,
yeah, it's like,
or the C one. Yeah, I mean, I just can't do these. You know?
It's weird that this is sometimes being taught in like Guitar 101. It's like this chord is like, oh man,
no way. No, I do it like that.
Yeah, or like
I'm doing that.
This.
Yeah.
This is like the nicest way.
Yeah, that's a nice sound. And,
yeah.
And it's just finding things that sound good, or sometimes, you know, you'll see another player do something interesting. Like I had a friend in London, my mate Crispin. He showed me a couple of chords that sound a bit more like a steel guitar, you know, and things like that. And I thought, that's a cool sound, you know, these kind of, a bit more of a stretch. Yeah. Because their harmonies are closer.
Yeah, with like a 6 as well sometimes.
Yeah, when you play with the wang bar, you know, it's like... it gets a bit more in a steel guitar territory or something, so...
Really nice.
There's always people out there doing interesting things.
Yeah.
I had a song where I liked the simple chord change that was basically geared around these chords, like an E minor, an F sharp, and a G basically. Mm-hmm. But then I wanted to add different colour to those chords or try and make it more interesting, so start off with this chord. But it's basically an E minor and F sharp. And then I would go. I was looking for a different colour and a different vibe. You know?
This is like we add the 9 to the E minor.
Yeah, 9. Do you mind if I turn the tremolo off for a second?
For sure.
It's just looking for a voice, and I heard that a few people doing that. It's interesting where sometimes you might have a movement in a chord, but you have a note that runs through all of them. You know?
Yeah.
So that F sharp ran through it. And instantly, it's just something for the music to hold to. Or, I don't know. I found things like that interesting. Put the rhythm in. So it's a very simple start. There's a clap. Just that kind of thing. So trying to mix a bit of melody in there with it because it's a very simple chord progression.
It sounds way more elaborate than just E minor, F sharp, G.
Yeah, it's finding a way to get a bit of drama in it somehow. Whatever mood you're trying to create. You know?
This is a nice movement.
Because one person who was a massive inspiration to me was Johnny Marr.
Okay, yeah.
And Johnny's, as well as me being into a lot of blues and rhythm and blues, Johnny had a lot of beautiful chords and that were outside of a kind of blues form, which were interesting to me. You know, a lot of minor keys. You know, you kind of simple chords like they're keeping that major 7 on there, then maybe a 6. You know, and so I got a lot of inspiration from him, really. Beautiful. Melodically. I mean, that's not one of his songs, but it's just chords that make me think of him, really.
Yeah. There's one technique that I saw you do that I really wanted to ask you about. It's where you play sort of tremolo with your...
the finger thing, yeah.
Yeah, the finger tremolo, or I don't know how you called it, but...
Well, I've seen a few people do this. John Lee Hooker used to do it. I've seen these clips of him doing it, you know. You can get it almost mandolin-like, you know. It's just a nice sound, you know. And it's easier to do with fingers, really, for me. Or like a bit of a gospel-y feel you can get in it, or really with use of reverb and stuff, you can create a constant tone and things like that. So
like a pedal.
It was just an effect that I liked and ended up using in songs, you know. It just helps create drama and stuff. I used that on one of our records. Because I kind of like sort of movie soundtracks and sort of like, kind of like...
Yeah, this could be from Dune, for example.
Yeah, or something that... You know, there's a lot of stuff about classic guitar culture that I love, especially blues and rhythm and blues. But sometimes it's good to kind of make non-guitar sounds as well, you know, if I can.
It sounds 100% different than using a pick. It's way more definite. Like...
But yeah, so I just like these kind of... Because when you get two notes the same, or you can bend them out. You know, just ways of getting atmosphere. Or I quite like playing with dissonance as well. So deliberately playing things that clash is good, you know. That sort of creates more of a mood with things sometimes. Or you can...
Yeah.
Sometimes notes that clash or are deliberately a little bit wonky or a bit sour, you know, can be good. And kind of got interested in that, especially with the music we've been making with Malcolm Cato, creating moods like that, where you can play things that kind of pull against the music. It's good because it just adds a different colour or makes something a bit more interesting out of the regular blues form or whatever.
And how do you find, because I know people's gonna ask like what notes are the wrong ones that will sound good? Because when I do it, it sounds...
I think it's personal because one thing I might like someone else won't, or there's no rules with the guitar, you know, whatever. There's no rules with any instrument, and that's what's exciting about some of those younger musicians is because they don't know the rules. They're just working with whatever they've learned and they're getting whatever they can out of it because they don't know what's correct or they don't. That's what's something really exciting about seeing younger people playing instruments or people who've only just started learning, no matter what age they are, because they're not thinking about the rules, they're just doing what they can, and whatever excites them is cool, you know. So dissonance is just another tool, but you hear it a lot in I guess movie scores and things where to create a bit of drama. So I got interested in it was a track I did that had tremolo on it, a song I wrote with the band THAT, where it was a guitar riff and a bit of musical arrangement I took to Matt Johnson, but I used the sort of clash notes in there. And they went to... But it came back to this riff, you know. That's nice. There's a bit of stretch on that last one, isn't it? You're getting clashes with things. You can play them both together, you know.
It's really cool.
And and then especially, but someone might think, oh, that sounds horrific, you know. But I don't know, I quite like it.
It's also like the bigger the tension, the more satisfaction the resolution gives you, right?
You get more dissonance when you play lower notes as well. It's an interesting thing. I didn't realise this, that the intervals seem much more kind of unpleasant when it's lower notes. Because if you play this an octave higher, it doesn't jar in the same way. But whereas that, so if you have notes that are clashing, you know, lower down, it's pretty horrible really, but it can still have its place, you know. If you put other notes in it, you might get it to work, but sometimes just two notes together could work in the right scene though, you know.
it also might just be physics because the frequencies low down are like are taking up more space.
Yeah, so it starts warbling more.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
But I mean, I like very pretty melodic things as well, but sometimes it's fun to think outside of that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, so you like melodies. What I hear you do often is like incorporating like melodies on top of your chords.
Yeah. The track that the music director for Better Call Saul liked was Why Don't You Do It, which I was inspired by, I guess, kind of R&B and soul guitar, really. The basic chord. So it's a C chord, then you put on the add 9, right? Which is the thing I used in the Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
And then to a major 7.
That's nice, yeah.
And then it's a B flat chord, I guess, but with a C on the bottom. So here, you're using your thumb to mute the A, and you're using your middle finger to mute the D. So you've got a 4-note chord across.
Oh, that's nice.
And then, which is like an R&B lick in F. My friend Edward Collins always called these like Memphis chords, you know, like a Steve Cropper thing.
Yeah. So I would visualize it like, and then.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then I guess it's an E flat chord, but I put a B flat on the bottom.
Ooh, that's lovely.
Which is something I used in a song. And then F. Back to C.
Oh man.
But I don't know if this came from it, but it, you know, I can't play this stuff, but it was like, it could be me being inspired by things like, you know.
You got it out.
That's that style. It's like mixing that kind of R&B style. So I guess that's what I like about a lot of that R&B guitar, and people like Steve Cropper or Kenel Dupree or Freddie Stone, who was Sly Stone's brother in the Family Stone. You know.
Yeah. There's no borders as well. You can do everything, like you said.
There's really no rules with a guitar. I mean, it's your time. You've got to do what you want with it, or just find things that excite you. You know, I think is.
I love that.
There's no right or wrong.
So in terms of rhythm guitar, would you practice with a metronome, or where does your sense of time come from? And do you have some tips?
Well, you know what I used to do a lot was, you know, if I wasn't able to rehearse or play my bandmates, I used to play along to records a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
And I used to like jamming along to records like a James Brown record or something, because obviously those bands were some of the greatest bands ever in history, especially that period, you know, sort of, you know, I guess late 60s, early 70s. Some of the players he had in his band then were just unbelievable, and the way they played as a group, it's just so infectious, that rhythm, that I would sometimes just try and jam along. I was quite happy to just jam along on a simple chord for a long time, just to get a vibe. And me and Lewis, the bass player in my band, we used to do that a lot. We would just play simple R&B patterns without drums sometimes, just to you know, just simple things like, I don't know, say a stereotypical R&B lick, you know. Just to try and feel like we're getting a pocket, you know, and getting it to groove, and just playing as much with your band as possible. You know, really trying to sit in with the drummer and the bass player is really important. And trying to get that. But I'd just be quite happy to practice grooves over and over again, or sometimes think of drum patterns I liked and try and play them on the guitar, you know.
Get the same groove in your...
You know, try and get some kind of conversation. Try and get a bit of a... just play it forever, really.
Yeah.
Just keep
really
playing.
get it ingrained in your system.
Yeah, and try and get it to feel right, because sometimes you feel like you're rushing it, or
yes.
it's too sloppy, or it's not always about. For me, it's not always about how accurate things are. It's about how it feels.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of the stuff, if you put what I'm playing on a grid, it wouldn't be in time.
Okay. Well, we're not doing this.
Yeah,
we're just listening and grooving.
And with my band, we don't record with click tracks or anything like that. We just play it. You know?
I once analyzed Jimi Hendrix like this. I know it's like blasphemy, but like if you analyze his time, like for example the intro to Little Wing, it goes from let's say 70 BPM to like 95 BPM, for example. It goes.
Loads of records do, and that's one thing that for me personally, I don't always know if click is a good idea.
Yeah. For
certain styles of music, I know people think it's good for editing, and it is because you can just move things, and it's not gonna. But sometimes you need songs to speed up a bit, and sometimes you need them to slow down.
Yeah.
I remember doing a session for someone once where they'd recorded, some of the band had recorded in the US. I was doing a session with somebody and they needed like an extra rhythm guitar on the song. So I got called to a studio in Oxford and we drove there. And there was this song that was like a bit like an Al Green kind of soul feel. And the second verse went very mellow. And there was these really great musicians who played on it from New York. And I remember being on the session and the producer was sort of kind of cursing the band, saying they've slowed down in verse 2. You know, it's like, because he was looking at it on the grid and he was like, they've slowed down. So I can't believe they've slowed down. But it was like, but if you listen to it, it felt right.
Yeah.
And I guess that brings up the question, what is in time? Is it matching up, is it the grid or is it what you're feeling here?
The grid is a relatively new phenomenon, of course.
Yeah.
For the past 6,000 years we've been jamming to our internal grooves, right, and not to the computers, basically.
Yeah, and I guess it means what's in time for you, whatever. But with my band, we tend to play without them.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of sessions where people want them. So.
Yeah. Do you want to try the Les Paul to get in a different?
Oh yeah, let's try that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's good for me to sometimes play a guitar that doesn't have a wang bar on it to stop me from using it all the time because you can overdo it. So it's good for me to have the wang bar taken away sometimes. Around with something for a while and it would take a while to find something interesting, you know, so I start playing things a bit boring at first. Nice guitar, this man. You did well.
It's also a riff in, by the way, and it's like, yeah, it's been hacked, but it's really nice.
It's so beautiful, man. It's gorgeous. I love that bridge pickup. It's killer.
But man, when you start a jam like this, do you have an idea where you want to go? Like
no, I was a bit lost
then.
I was like, so sometimes it takes a while for me when I'm trying to work on something, or sometimes we're just playing for fun. I'll be playing like, no, I'm not feeling it yet, and then eventually you might find a zone where it's but I quite like that. It takes a while to either feel like the groove is right or the feel is right, or what I'm playing is, I don't want to slip into things that are too cheesy or too, for me or whatever. So it's.
But it's often based on a bluesy format. Or I think soul, maybe R&B.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of what I do. So it might start there, then I might try and find ways to make it stranger or. I can play you one more thing if you like.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just going to put the tremolo on the amp.
Yeah.
I like the idea of doing something kind of like a New Orleans inspired, a bit like the meters or something, but we put it into a different time signature, like more like a 3 or 6 time. So just took it out of being usual 4/4.
I heard you play this on Instagram because I remember being a little bit, what's happening with the timing in the beginning? But then when you feel it, it's like, because funk is so often like 4/4 bass, like the meters is always like.
Yeah, it's just an idea I had for that time, and it's interesting that track because the guitar is pretty simple, the bass is a bit more involved, but the real interesting thing is Malcolm's drums, because he sort of totally plays and skips around that beat, and that's what makes it interesting, because the guitar is fairly consistent. It's like an R&B thing, really. But it's all
the lick in D. What's the?
It's the same thing I used in Why Don't You Do It. Yeah. So it's a D on the bottom, but it's accenting like a
G, basically.
A blues 8, and E7. That's the basic pattern. Just a bit of blues in between, really. You're still keeping the rhythm guitar in there, you've still got the chop. But something like this, I mean, certain keys work well because you can use things to your advantage, like the open strings in certain keys. Because, like playing in B, it's quite cool having the open B there. You know, then you can. You know, or any key, like playing C, you've got your open tune, which is pretty good. I'm a bit out of tune, but so it's just. Certain keys are good. There's a track on our new record where it's in F sharp, but it's good because you've got the G, which totally goes against it, but I wrote a riff. So it's trying to find, so you can use the open strings to your advantage in lots of different keys, even ones where the strings clash or whatever. Or,
like we just heard.
Or you know, like C sharp is good because you've got the low E. which is good, like for certain things. So it's just finding things. There's so much in the guitar still that we haven't found, you know, or I haven't found. But a lot of time when I'm playing on my own, I'm just looking for some reason I really love tremolo. I know it's an obvious effect, but that's one of the few effects that I do use. I mean, I like fuzz and I use reverb. I basically use effects that are really old-fashioned because I feel like they're still an extension of things. I like the kind of gospel feel of tremolo. You know, it's just I think it's very expressive, I think, tremolo. You can really play a lot less with it and it's really nice, you know. It's a great effect for ballads. I know it's been used so many times. But it's just such a beautiful sound. It's just pretty, you know. I like tremolo. It's just a beautiful.
Goes straight to the heart.
Yeah, whether it's an R&B soul thing or, you know, it's good with a fuzz box. It's quite trippy, or it's good for a good old-fashioned bit of Dwayne Eddy. Heavy twang, you know. I'm not an expert on gospel music, but I'm inspired by it, but I can't play it, I would say. Okay. It's just that, you know, this isn't a song, really. They're just chords that make me think of gospel. It's taken me a while to learn to play less. And I know people always talk about the less is more thing, and then people go, no, it's not, more is more, and whatever, you know. It's like a mate of mine said, well, if less is more, imagine how much more would be, you know. It's good, but I quite like, but having the confidence to leave space is a pretty cool thing. There's so much more I can do, but sometimes all you need to do in that song, you know. Or something that might be all you need for like 2 minutes, and then.
One last thing I want to ask you before we wrap up. Almost every note you play, there is some articulation to it. Either with the pick, or with the fingers, or with bending slightly.
I get the impression that some players now, maybe wrong, but some players, a lot of their dynamic comes from the floor with the effects. Whereas there's so much dynamic, if you can get a lot yourself, then it's quite expressive, and the old school way using the volume control as well. But I mean, I loved people like Peter Green and Danny Cohen, you know, and Danny Cohen had that beautiful vibrato. So that's a voice in itself. I'll just turn the tremolo off for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, am I going around the wrong way? Okay. But you can get a nice sound with that. You know, I did a tribute with my friend Joe Hollick where we did a tribute to Danny Cohen. So we did a bunch of early Fleetwood Mac stuff. Oh. But trying to get that vibrato was so hard, you know, I couldn't do it. But it was great fun because we just played 2 Les Pauls into old Fender amps, no pedals, and turned them all the way up. It was such a liberating gig. It was so much fun. But he had this beautiful shimp. He was doing this when he was a teenager, you know. It's amazing. Yeah. So you got vibrato, and other people have a slower vibrato. So there's a lot of colour in that anyway. Yeah. So there's things like vibrato, bending the strings.
Yeah, but also like when you're playing. Every note has some form of movement. It's
I'm always trying. I mean, I'm never satisfied with it. I don't think anyone ever is. But it's just trying to get that And I'm trying to play more dynamically a lot and say more with less. And, I mean, this is a lovely sounding guitar. I guess an obvious bluesy like that, but if sometimes putting the there's a lot of sound in the guitar. Mixture of fingers, picks. There's
lots of dynamics.
There's a lot you can do before you start worrying about what's in the chain.
Yeah, you don't need a boost if you play on 60%, for example.
No, I used to, quite often, because on a Gibson normally the neck pickup's a bit kind of bigger sounding.
Yeah.
You can use that as a boost. Really, I used to put in the old days of our band. I didn't used to use any pedals. I play a Gibson 3/0 a lot, 330, and. If you got the amp sort of cooking, I used to do a lot of the rhythm stuff with the middle sound because it's like an R&B funk sound, really, a soul sound. I used to do a lot of the solos on the front pickup because it was kind of boomier and woofier, so it felt like it was a boost, especially if you're playing low string stuff, so you could do a lot of rhythm stuff. You've got it there, or if you want it to cut more, you use the bridge. Also, if you're using a pick, or you can get quite a dynamic. There's a lot of different dynamic just from switching around with this. Or I've played some sort of heavier, sort of louder rock and roll music, but I try and still think of the R&B groove when I'm doing it.
Interesting.
Because it's just looser and a bit more greasy, and you can put that into playing with a rockier tone or something.
Yeah.
I think.
Interesting.
Even sort of more sleazier sort of Stones things, or playing heavier on the low and more chordy, so it's less R&B, it's a bit more rock and roll, but still trying to think of that R&B pocket.
Yeah, it's still
sort
there.
of thing.
You're also doing the drummer a little bit. That's
because you can accent that in different ways, but you can mute the strings. Keep the bass going. Use the top of the chord. Bits of lead guitar in between is what I tend to do. I'm quite a scruffy guitar player. I'm not refined. I'm quite clunky in the way I play.
I would describe it as a very living rhythm part. It can go everywhere. You never know what happens.
Yeah, I think sometimes I play a different verse or something like that.
It makes it exciting to listen to.
Yeah.
Sometimes out of the blue you pop in this little lick high up the neck or low up the lap.
Yeah, just a bit of colour here and there. But if you're playing that rhythmically but also with a drummer, then it becomes very percussive, it's really interesting, or whatever the bass player's doing. And then, but then sometimes I'll hold out and play no rhythm at all and just let, the bass and drums do it or whatever. But it just means you've got scope, especially because I'm playing a 3-piece band. Quite a lot of time it's about taking away because there's only so much you can add.
Yeah.
So it's like, you've got to start off holding back, really.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to think about that. I better give you this guitar back before I start crying about it on the way home.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Drop a comment. Check out the music. What's the one song everyone needs to listen to that you wrote?
On the new album, I mean, there's lots that I like, but I'd say one song that's a little bit different for us is the last track called Count of Four on the album. That's something a little bit different for us.